All right. Good morning, everybody. I think we're going to go ahead and get started here. For those I have not met, my name is Teo. I'm the Medical Affairs Fellowship Director here at UCB. We have an awesome panel of UCB folks here who are in various and variety of different roles, but I think it will be a great learning. So I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves and what they do at UCB and get on with the show.
Should I start today?
Yes,
all right, excellent. Hi, everybody. Very excited to be here. My name is Paul Hannes. I'm the strategic planning lead for the U.S. immunology business. Essentially what that means, I wear a lot of hats. So not only do I help Jeff and the IPBU leadership team kind of get through our forecasting and our budget process and things like that on an annual cycle, I lead up brand planning and liaise with our teams across, with the global folks with corporate strategy and so on and so forth to make sure our teams and help them ensure that we are getting to where we need to go. Anything related to planning, regarding innovation, digital business transformation, that kind of thing. I also help the teams sort of focus what the strategy is and the adoption and how we also get there as a team. So that's me. Very excited to be here. How about you, Jeff?
Thanks, Paul. So my name is Jeff Stark, and I lead the Immunology Medical Affairs team here at UCB, based here in Atlanta. My personal background is as a physician, so previously practiced in a former life as a rheumatologist before moving into industry roles. And maybe we'll talk a little bit more about medical affairs as we go on, but for those not familiar with the function, it really is the external facing aspect of the business focused on scientific engagement. And so everyone within our organization, because their role is really around external engagement with HCPs, is themselves a highly trained individual. So our organization is made up almost entirely of PharmDs, PhDs, and MDs. And that's to really foster what we think of as a true peer-to-peer kind of dialogue with members of the clinical and the scientific community. So we have a home office team that's really focused around the strategy of that engagement, thinking about things like new evidence generation, creating tools for our teams, medical education initiatives. And then we have field-facing teams who are out in their individual territories interacting with experts there. So it's great to be with you all this morning. Simon?
Yeah, thank you. So good morning, everyone. Simon Lemmy. I'm the talent lead for the Patient Impact Value Driver. So if you look at the new operating model, we have 3 value drivers: patient solutions, patient evidence, patient impact, and I'm the HR person for the patient impact. Before that, because people always love HR, really, I noticed that. I always love it. Before, that's why we call it talent, because anyone just likes it. Before that, I worked very closely with Jeff. I was the head of the rheumatology commercial team, and then at one point I had the GI business, so I had medical and commercial as well. My friend?
Good afternoon. First of all, thank you for having me. My name is Trenton Meredith, and I am the U.S. head or DE&I lead at UCB here in Atlanta, Georgia, driving all things DE&I on the U.S. side, working closely with Simon on many of our initiatives. But my job and my goal is to ensure that we have a equitable workplace for all employees here at UCB, launching programs such as our new hiring program, new ways of hiring, pay equity, self-ID campaigns, but really trying to shape a culture where everyone feels inclusive and have equal opportunities to succeed here at UCB. Prior to being in this role, I was a senior clinical project manager, agility head in neurology, or now Leptin-Rare syndrome. So just happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. For those of you that I haven't met, my name is Shelby Matthews. I am a first-year Medical Affairs Immunology Fellow. I am from UCB, and just to give the panelists an idea of who's in the room, you have program directors here, you have second-year fellows and first-year fellows, all on the National Fellows Council at IPHO. So I'm going to kick it off with some questions that are more general-based. Feel free to answer them, and then I'll get into some more specific questions. We'll open it at the end for questions for the general audience to ask. Starting with kind of a broad question, second-year fellows that are in the room, they're looking to transition to a full-time role, and first-year fellows are just getting started and are really looking to hone our skills. Being industry professionals and with your experience, what are some essential skills that we need to develop as a full-time employee? Maybe we can start Paul. You have-
Oh,
yeah.
Well, that's a really great question. I don't have the traditional career path, by the way. So I grew up in advertising and journalism. Decided I did not want to be paid by the word and found a much more lucrative way of translating writing and research into a strategy career. Circle that, move forward a little bit. I became a futurist and an innovation consultant, and had the opportunity to work with a lot of different executives and different industries across the world to help launch cruise lines that need to be sort of sustainable for 30 years, or to help launch new food brands or create new investment models in insurance and things like that. And so I kind of landed here after a career of just building from one skill set to the next, and really recognizing the type of work that I like to do. And that's understanding what are the underlying trends sort of driving the future of everything or a particular industry. Being able to then translate that into the insight of, if these are the things that are taking place, it means and suggests that businesses are going to be heading in this direction. How do I tell that story to folks that I'm sitting up here with to say, hey, these are the types of changes that we need to think about and consider as we move forward? And so I think for me, that answer is really related to challenging your own assumptions around what it is that you want to do for a living, and how you want to perform whatever it is you want to do. And also think about the brilliance of having the ability to work across about 40 or 50 different industries. So I got to see where were the industries that were ripe for innovation and why. And so I really honed my why, looking for a place that is a bit more noble than others, rather than hawking McDonald's hamburgers. What's more noble than working for a pharmaceutical organization that is changing people's lives? And so for me, it's all about finding your passion, finding, your purpose, and moving on from there, and building your skill sets on top of that. I can't really speak from a medical angle because I am a journalist by training, so.
No, we love the different perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say as we are, looking to add to our team, what are the things that are our top priorities for me? I mean, we look for people who have a deep scientific curiosity, who are really driven by a desire to learn, who are constantly looking to add to the diversity of their experience, who are innovative and forward-looking. But apart from those things, there are some softer things that are maybe equally important. Those include people who are really collaborative by nature, right? Who love to bring together the diversity of a team to really maximize the impact of what that team can achieve. We're looking for people who are team players and who fit the team culture. And at UCB, I think a very big part of that, as Paul alluded to, is this intense focus on patient value as the North Star for what we do. And so someone who is driven by that, who holds that as the highest priority, for whom that is the inspiration for the work that they do day to day, is absolutely something that we're looking for. The other thing I'd like to maybe build on a little bit from what Paul said, and I think you'll find it's true for many of us in our career pathway, is that we have not had a linear career pathway. Many of us have done something and then changed to something entirely different. And I would just make sure and highlight that to this group, because that diversity of experience makes you stronger. And so, don't be afraid to have little excursions on your career path to acquire that broader perspective and that diversity of experience. I think it makes you a stronger person and ultimately allows you to bring greater value in maybe what is the ultimate dream role for you, because you have had a diversity of experience leading to that role.
So I'll maybe hit that point and then come back to a couple of qualities. When I graduated from college and I didn't get an advanced degree immediately, I started in the restaurant business. My wife and I, we saw an opportunity. We were 21. We opened a restaurant. We got carded when we were getting our beer license. That's how young we were. And we did it for like 9 years, and we had a couple of restaurants, we had some things, and then I had this epiphany, like, this is not game plan for the future. This is not what I want to do. So then became a pharmaceutical salesperson, did a lot of other different roles. But if you just said, when I started my career, at some point you're going to be running the talent for the commercial organization of the pharmaceutical company, I would have thought that was never part of my thought. Actually, 5 years ago, it was never part of my thought. I mean, I think if I had said to Jeff, yeah, I think I'm going to go into talent 5 years ago, what? So it's that what has kept me energized is having those completely different journeys. You know, waking up going, I have no clue what all this means, but I've got a support system around to kind of figure it out. So I interview a lot of people. The challenge that I face is I can't interview people to find out their competency for the role they're applying for because I just don't have the depth. Kind of like what Paul was saying, there's so many different roles, and I don't. People can say all the words that make sense, and I'm going to believe them. So I'm looking for, will they challenge me and the organization to make us better? Because you use the word challenge in a different way. For me, it was, I'm looking for someone who's going to really challenge us and then bring innovation to us that we're not currently thinking through. Because after a while, all of us become, I call it UCBIs, right? We just become, so everything we're doing here becomes normal. And even if it doesn't make sense to everyone else, for us it makes sense. I'm looking for people who come in and say, why don't you, have you thought of, you should do? And especially now bringing in innovation and really, especially how we use AI and things like that to continue to evolve.
You know, I would say being young in your career, coming to a new organization, it can be somewhat overwhelming trying to understand the culture, taking what you've learned in your academic journey and apply it to your professional journey. I would say one of the things that you would have to do is be very observant first, meaning understand the culture, understanding who you're working with, understanding the ask, understanding the why, and then be inquisitive, right? Asking questions, not just asking questions, but asking the right questions, right? That are going to bring value to where you're working or the team that you're working on. And then UCB, my experience, UCB has a very entrepreneurial spirit, meaning they're very open for, as stated here before, new and innovative ideas. So don't be afraid to bring in that new innovative thought process. But more importantly, don't be afraid to fail. As long as you're not having the same failure over and over and over again. Because the only way you're going to be successful here at UCB is you're going to have to fail, right? Take that, learn from it, and then build upon it. And being able to articulate yourself in a manner that's clear and precise, being able to have opportunities to present in front of leadership, your peers, all of these things are very essential in this environment. UCB has an environment where we have a principle. We talk about helpfulness and generosity. We're exactly that, right? And so in this environment, you have an opportunity to succeed. So just come in with the energy, the passion, and the desire to be successful. Because at the end of the day, everything we do at UCB is really to help our greatest stakeholder, which are our patients. But don't become overwhelmed because you're new. Oh, well, I don't know what, someone who's been at UCB for 10 years numbers, right? Balance yourself. Let's learn as much as possible and bring what your specific skill set here to help our organization grow.
Trent, can I build on that
Sure.
as well? Do you mind, Shelby?
Please.
Yeah, I mean, looking back, I joined this organization in 2016, right? So been here not as long as quite as many as some of the other folks, but I joined from a small consulting firm that was 25 million in revenue a year. And I joined, and it was like shell shock from a cultural angle, joining a big $5 billion organization and a little bit more red tape to cut through in certain areas that I wasn't used to. And so I would encourage you as you join an organization such as UCB, like think about, well, what are those things that are really getting in the way of doing great innovative work? And then who do you want to learn from? I think the best thing I've ever had in my career is aligning with a specific manager who I've been working with on and off for about 7 or 8 years now, and have been learning a ton. And also those experiences too, when you think you've learned everything, then all of a sudden, as Simon and Jeff have alluded to, is sort of that internal mobility. You end up doing something else and learning all sorts of new things. And so it just becomes more and more skills and tools in your toolbox. I started off in market research and insights here at UCB, moved into competitive intelligence, started working with enterprise risk management, then went and moved into some sort of strategic career. And as far as I look back, every skill set is kind of built on top of each other. And now I think about where could I go next? Because this organization has, I think, has been very, very, I mean, they encourage internal mobility. So seek out those opportunities, and those opportunities will not come directly to you. You have to kind of raise your hand and then prove it out, which if you are hungry and want to do the right thing and want to learn, that it does show.
You gave me a great segue because, you're talking about growth and learning and an appetite for knowledge. And one of the questions that was asked is what it looks like continuous learning and professional development. How does that play a role in staying relevant in the pharmaceutical industry? I know you spoke to your diverse backgrounds. Can you think of anything else that has really helped you?
I would say, UCB, we have some pretty robust learning and development programs. Much like Paul said, you have to raise your hands and you have to be proactive in seeking out those things. But also as a part of learning and development here at UCB, is building your village, right? When you build your village, you learn from others in the organization. When I look at my career path, I came in, this is my second tour at UCB, so I was here previously as a project manager from 2007 to 2010, left and came back in 2017. I've been doing project management for the majority of my professional career, but then having the opportunity to segue to a totally different field, right, in DE&I, and that transition probably would not have happened, number one, if I hadn't raised my hand. So I'm an introvert by nature, but working with folks like these that sit here on this panel that I've learned from, interacted with, and worked with, has given me that opportunity to learn and grow. And so when you build your village, that is an essential part of the learning and development outside of being a part of a learning development program or taking a certain training course, but that village piece, because these people have the knowledge. The people that have been here the longest have had certain experiences or journeys or continuously climbing the career ladder here, they have the knowledge. So you build that village that can help you with your learning development in this industry and within UCB.
Okay, and I real quick. I just want to make sure we're not all from UCB here, and so I think reflecting on your own personal journey outside of your UCB village, how did you do that learning and development, right? Because I think people are trying to tap into other networks.
Yeah.
What can they do? What have you seen work for you outside of that UCB environment?
Networking, number one. One of the greatest things I think that could have been invented was LinkedIn, right? And LinkedIn is the business social media. But reaching out to people that are either in the same industry or people that are not in the same industry but have the same similar job or career path, right? Reaching out, not being afraid to ask the questions, not being afraid to be a part of your external village, right? Looking at different courses that can align to where you want to go from a career path perspective. Those are the type of things just holistically that you can do to learn, grow, and develop as a professional. It's very, very, very key. And you have to be very intentional about your growth, right? Again, if you are, again, I'm an introvert, so I'm not always the first person to raise my hand, but I quickly learned about wanting to grow as a professional that I have to. So reaching out to those people, making those connections, is going to be very, very key for your overall growth and development as a professional.
Amazon Prime,
Amazon Prime.
that's better than LinkedIn.
So,
I'm very, very popular in my house.
well, I mean, I get packages.
I've become I have a problem. I'm on Twitter looking at something. I see something I like and I buy it. And then 2 minutes later, I'm like, but then it ships and it arrives the next day and I'm just very happy, so. It's better. So I have a paranoia of becoming irrelevant. It's something that I don't know why I am, I've never seen and asked any expert on why I have this fear. So when I went into pharmaceuticals, I did my MBA. Luckily, the company paid for some of it. I had to pay for a little bit of it, but it was because I had this fear that people were smarter than me, brighter than me, had greater knowledge about business than I did. And then when I started leading the digital world before Paul and others came, I got nervous because I didn't know what the heck I was doing. So then I did a course at the University of Cambridge. Then I felt like I was competent, got into talent, and I'm like, oh gosh, don't know much about talent. I know basically how leading people, but the depth of those, so I've taken courses. So I think that for me, it's always been the paranoia, and your networking thing is critical. When I started in talent, I mean, I didn't know anyone other than the UCB, and now I have a network of probably 20 CHROs that we talk every month for a couple of hours about any subject comes up. And George Floyd thing occurs, I'm on the call with them, like, what are the actions you're going to take? The Supreme Court justice make decisions on affirmative action. I'm reaching out to them saying, what are you going to make a company position? Are you going to this? Having that network of just people who we can just talk to and challenge ourselves. And it also helps with my career planning too, right? Because I start to find people who could come work at UCB, but I'm also understanding other alternatives.
I would maybe add just a couple additional aspects. One is a certain type of networking, which is mentorship. I think it's very important to identify people who have undergone a journey and had the opportunity to learn from that and can give you perspective on your own career pathway. And so I would encourage everyone to seek out that kind of particular networking relationship, because I think there is value there. I think other thing that I would just mention is that comfortability is the enemy of growth. So I would constantly assess yourself as to how comfortable you are with what you're doing. Obviously, it's nice to be comfortable. It feels good to be comfortable. But there can also be a deterring satisfaction with being comfortable. And I think that the people who grow the most are those who are constantly challenging themselves and pushing themselves out of their comfort zone. So ask yourself with some regularity, am I getting too comfortable? If so, it's probably a time to start thinking about a change and putting yourself in a situation of uncomfortability where you actually have the opportunity for growth. And then finally, I would say, seek feedback. I think we have this unfortunate perception that feedback is negative. Feedback, even if it is critical feedback, is a gift, because it gives you the opportunity to get perspective from outside of yourself, to weigh that, to think about how you can put it into practice and how it can help you grow. And so think of it that way. Truly shift your mindset away from feedback as a negative thing to feedback as a gift and an opportunity, so that you're actively seeking it, and not just taking it occasionally when it happens to come your way in an unsolicited fashion.
I guess I can yes and a couple things here. We've heard a lot about feedback, collaboration, your networks and everything like that. The world's changing, right? The way that when I think of my own learning journey, I'm always thinking, well, how's it changing? And a lot of times you have to seek that, not within your own sphere, not within the medical industry, not within healthcare. You have to look to the periphery. You have to understand, how is the periphery impacting what my organization is doing impact on providing to patients. It's no secret that healthcare is a $7 trillion piece of pie within the United States alone. It's no secret that there are many industries that are trying to get their slice. Look at what retail is doing. Look at the technology industry. Look at lifestyle companies. Look at some of these other financial services. They're trying to find ways, for example, of connecting the dots between your financial wellness and the physical impacts of that to your health and well-being. And when you think about too, there's been a lot of research that's been done on this that suggests somewhere between 70 to 80% of all healthcare outcomes, are actually driven by social determinants of health or other drivers of health beyond clinical factors. Well, if that's the case, how are these folks actually, how do we solve for that? What do we do and how do we work with those types of organizations that are really trying to change healthcare for the better to solve for these types of issues together? So that's what I would suggest doing, is I've always thought, all right, if healthcare is trying to do this, who else is trying to do that we're not even thinking about? And then I go out and I learn from that periphery and see if anything could apply in terms of the way that we partner externally or the way that we work with patients from an advocacy standpoint or other things. And so I'm always trying to think, what's going on outside of my industry that I can bring internally, and how do I apply it internally?
Thank you for those answers. I'm going to move into some specific questions, and I'm going to start off with Trenton. What specific skills are essential for professionals to promote and support DE&I initiatives within the pharmaceutical industry?
Patience. Being a DE&I practitioner, number one, you have to know, most importantly, how to communicate. You also have to be able to receive information, digest the information, and then put out what's important. Because in this journey, you're not only just dealing with putting together a process or putting a policy or procedure in place, but you're actually dealing with change behavior, right? So you have to be able to understand change behavior, the psychological impact behind some of the things that are trying to be implemented within the whole DE&I space. You have to be able to articulate your vision, your purpose to executive leaders, right? Which is very clear, which is very key because, here at UCB, our executive leaders, our USLT leaders truly support DE&I, right? They look to us to drive the vision. We have to be able to articulate that output or what that potential output is going to be. So being able to be clear about what you want to accomplish and how it impacts the employees is going to be extremely critical from a skill set perspective. You got to know how to, when you say communicate, not only verbally communicate, but put it in a concise form when you're writing or presenting. It's very key. At UCB, we haven't learned, we're very big at PowerPoint and presenting. And so you got to be able to put a lot of information in concise form to get your point across.
Yeah, we talked a lot about DE&I. I got 3 daughters, and one of them was looking for a career, and I said, find a company that is committed to DE&I and publicly states it. Don't work for a company that isn't publicly stating it, because right now you've got 2 worlds that are occurring. You got those people who are committed and in, and those who are less committed, scared, and moving out. And it's really clear. There's companies that are going deeper and deeper. We're investing more and more and more. We're challenging ourselves to get there because the external environment is challenging. Should you be in? Is it right to be in? And to me, this is not even a question. It's just a conscience you have to have. So, and that's what I told my daughter, who's as passionate as I am. If they're not publicly stating it, then you need to find a place that is like just an add-on to what you're saying.
And let me end with this. I jokingly said patience, but you have to. We don't look in any industry. You never see patience as a skill set. No one puts in their resume, I have a patient skill set. But patience is a skill set that you have to have because again, you work across so many different individuals that have a need, right? A desire, an expected outcome. So you have to be patient to hear that, to understand that. Not only are you dealing with that, but you're dealing with employees that have experiences. You have to be able to take that, digest that, and all of that you put together to come up with what's going to be the most equitable, feasible outcome for our employees. So being able to be patient, being able to listen, being able to understand, digest, and then put something out that's going to be valuable is a very, very key skill set to that.
Thank you. Staying on the topic of DE&I, Simon, what role does talent acquisition have in fostering a diverse and inclusive workforce?
Probably the hiring manager is critical, right? Because they have to be open to looking at all the talent that comes in front of them. The talent acquisition team, which is the recruits that we utilize, they're the ones who bring in the highly talented, diverse people to the hiring manager. So if you don't have the right training, the right mindset, the right ethics, the right policies and approaches, then the hiring manager doesn't even have that opportunity. And so we've spent the last 2 years really thinking through how do we bring the right talent in, and then also how do we make sure that the talent that we have within the company gets the exposure to the right opportunities. But we have a very defined process. We don't interview people unless there's a diverse group of people coming in. We don't interview people unless the panel of people doing the interviews are also diverse, because we want to make sure that the opportunity is not based upon anything but the person who has the highest potential. And I use that word, the highest potential, because what a lot of people say is, well, we'll always hire the best person for the job. I'm like, no, I don't hire the best person for the job who's currently best for that job. I hire the person who's going to has the greatest potential for that role, because what I'm looking for is people who can exceed those potentials. But if you just go for the best person for the role, it becomes an experience thing, right? And in this company, we have a more seasoned employee base. Our average employee is 47. So that becomes a challenge for us for a lot of factors, especially bringing innovative ideas, because typically, that's why I have paranoia always, newer people into the marketplace are bringing more innovation, more different, because that's part of it. It doesn't mean to say everyone, but that's what we want to kind of bring in, new, fresh ideas and talent. Did I address the question?
Definitely, thank you, that was a great answer. Kind of shifting.
Better than I did.
We'll be grading you after on your answers. Kind of shifting focus back to a clinical mindset, Jeff. We know that the pharmaceutical industry is rapidly changing. How can professionals like us stay up to date with these rapid advancements, especially in our therapeutic areas, and kind of integrate this knowledge and these changes into our work?
Yeah, thanks, Shelby. It's a really great question. I mean, I think that's sort of an expectation that we have of all of our team members. You know, medical affairs by its very nature is cutting edge. And so we are always kind of operating at the edge of science with what's innovative, what's new, not even what's available right now, but what's even on the further horizon in terms of trends that are coming down the road. And so, you know, being agile, being curious, you know, sort of looking for that next thing and being aware of it and anticipating it and planning for it is kind of an integral part of the mindset that we really look for in our team. I think, you know, there are multiple ways you can do that. Some of them we've addressed, I think, peripherally, talking about development, right? Because as you're learning and seeking new experiences and exposing yourself to new things, you're going to have that forward-looking perspective that we find so essential. For us, I would say in medical affairs, one of the most important ways that we achieve that is actually through external engagement, the relationships that we cultivate in the community among the clinical thought leaders, among the scientific experts, engaging with them individually, being at scientific congresses where they're presenting the latest data, reading their publications. This is a way that we're, you know, kind of constantly staying up to speed on what's new, what's innovative, and what's coming down the pipeline. So yeah, I think seeking those experiences, building those external relationships are for us one of the most important ways to do that.
Thank you. We've spoken a lot about innovation, and Paul, you have a really great team that's very innovative. Speaking with artificial intelligence, how is artificial intelligence transforming the pharmaceutical industry, and what skills are essential to be able to leverage AI effectively as a professional?
We're diving right into AI already.
Yes, we are.
All right. Oh, boy. So AI has been around for a long time, right? When you think about machine learning, think about every Excel formula that you put in, that's machine learning at its most basic level. Where AI has started to transform things is not in its ability of programming an algorithm to do something for you, but to program an algorithm to learn and do the process differently, or do it better, or more efficiently. And now where we're at with generative AI is it's not just learning how to do things differently, it's creating new data, new ways of doing things, and so on and so forth. And so 2023 was a huge year for the generative AI space at large. It is still very, very much top of the trough of disillusionment, which is a diffusion curve for innovation. So there's gonna be a lot of winners, there's gonna be a lot of losers. But we're in that space right now where we're looking for that application, that applicability. And specifically within pharmaceuticals and life sciences, people are thinking about it in terms of not just what could we use it for that's gonna help save us money. They're thinking about how could this actually create new value for folks. And so we're looking at it holistically across the value chain, from research and development all the way through clinical, through market authorization and commercial and sales, functions, talent, operations, supply chain management, patient support, all of that. People are starting to figure out how do we utilize this amazing tool that some of us may not have played around with too much just yet, and that's okay, because number one, pharma is behind other industries right now, and we're playing catch up. The organizations that are pretty far ahead right now are sort of consumer tech companies, consumer companies, and so on, as you would think about and consider. But when you think about in pharma, how might we increase our efficiencies in research and development, right? How might we use generative AI to envision protein structures, to understand what indication might a molecule target best, or move from there? Or how might we use AI to predict the likelihood of a specific clinical trial being successful and moving on to the next phase? So those are some early stage applications that we're seeing. We're also seeing AI help to design molecules. There's 10 to the 60th compounds out there when you think about 10 to the 60th power compounds out there. When you think about how big the world is and all the different molecules you might come up against. And I'm not a scientist. I read this in a blog years ago and it blew my mind. But that is a number that the human brain cannot even fathom. Only using like quantum tools that are coming out as well, is that going to be able to really, are we really going to do anything about that? Well, many companies are starting to figure out, well, what if I bring all of my data together, from clinical to biological to real world data, like from your health trackers and things like that, and claims data and so on. How might I be able to spot biomarkers in digital data to help me understand, is this an expression of that disease or this disease? How might I use generative AI to help us in recruitment for clinical trials? Because a lot of clinical trials, as I'm sure you all know, very hard to recruit for, especially in a world where there are more companies with pipelines, with drug pipelines than ever, something like 5 times what we had in 2020. There's 8,000 or so companies that have active drug pipelines, and there are over 22,000 molecules in the pipeline right now. And that's another 4 or 5 times where we were at in 2020, right? So the demand for clinical studies has grown through the roof, but finding patients is even that much harder. So how do you utilize generative AI to help you spot and track and follow the data trails where these patients might be, and then also recruit them to sites and things of that nature? So that's just on the clinical side. On the commercial side of things, think about medical, legal, regulatory review. How do you speed it up? There are generative AI companies out there that have products that really are aimed at helping us get through one of the biggest bottlenecks that we deal with within our industry, is how do we review everything and get it out there, especially during years of drug launch, right? When you've got 10 times the number of materials coming at your review committee constantly. How do you help them get through and make sure that you're identifying the pieces, and the specific pieces that really need review versus going through everything line by line by line? The human brain is going to want to go through everything line by line by line by line. So that's sort of the human factor that we have to solve for. Also, there's a thing that utilizing artificial intelligence to identify specific HCP in the sales community, we call them targets. Who's more likely to prescribe my brand, and what should I say to them, and when should I say it, and how should I say it? Is it an email? Is it a text message? Is it an in-person, face-to-face visit? In medical sales, in medical science liaisons, what messaging should we bring forward? Do we need to talk about the efficacy or the safety? How do we utilize AI to target specific messages around their scientific experience as well? And then just from a functional standpoint, how do you use AI in recruitment? How do you then solve for an algorithm that might be bringing up the wrong candidate, because that does happen, right? How do you get over those kind of things? And their supply chain, how do you make sure that you've got enough drug going through your manufacturing facilities? Or how do you understand where there might be bottlenecks in your manufacturing pipeline? When the pandemic shuts everything down, how do you get your drug from point A to point B so that your patient's life is not disrupted for too long, right? So these are some of the big questions that are going through. And then I think in pharma right now, where everybody's really starting is, what are those processes that we could that there are so many barriers and bottlenecks, how do we drive efficiency into everything? And then where do we go from there? So that's the big conversations. How do we create those cost savings and those people savings to free people up from, filling out all the documentation? Or how do we help with regulatory filings with AI and create more man hours to do higher level tasks? That's kind of where we're at right now.
Thank you. We are going to spend just a few more minutes talking about AI. I have a few follow-up questions. You already touched on clinical trials and AI's use in it. Could you maybe elaborate further and provide some examples of how AI can improve clinical trial transparency and efficientness?
So from a transparency standpoint, if you're able to build, there's a lot of regulatory queries as you go through the development process, right? And by no means am I a clinical trials expert, by the way, so I want to make that caveat. So Jeff, keep me honest if you've learned a thing or two about this, but there's a lot of health regulatory queries throughout the process. And that takes time, that takes energy. Can you use generative AI, for example, to anticipate what types of queries are coming down the line, and to anticipate how you might answer those queries, or to anticipate when and where, so you can free up resource when you think it's going to best happen? So a lot of it is in scheduling and anticipating the questions that could come from the regulatory bodies. But then also too, from a transparency standpoint, is can you then use generative AI to take all the clinical data, all of the claims data, social determinants of health data, other real world data that you might have, and create a report almost essentially like that. I think the general rule of thumb is that an algorithm is going to be able to write about 80% of it for you before you have to go in and start making adjustments. So you don't want to rely completely on the algorithms. But can you then use these algorithms to file your daily reporting on the clinical trial, or utilize it in patient recruitment and recruit patients much more quickly, shave a year off of your clinical trial, if possible. There's been some documented cases of that happening. There's a company called Deep 6 AI that is focused solely on using AI in different data streams to identify patients that are more likely to be able to be a part of your clinical trial. So how do we tap into those types of tools? Those are some of the key ones, I would say, from a clinical perspective. But then also, too, there are companies out there that are generating synthetic data. And you might be familiar with the word digital twin. Imagine, this is Paul Hannes right here. Here's his digital twin. I have an identical twin, by the way, okay? So that's beside the point. But here's his digital twin. It's an avatar with all of his health history. And, you know, he's XYZ years old, makes XYZ kind of money, has this kind of education, has all these, and they build this digital twin of my entire health history, my social determinants, impacts, and all of that. And then they're able to personalize a drug by testing my digital twin, by saying he's more likely, we haven't tried it yet, the real drug in him, but we might be able to get a sense for how he might respond to a drug. And therefore we should probably then recruit him into this study, right? There are companies that are designing these avatars right now. So I would say, how do we tap into that? What else don't we know? Because that's a great thing about generative AI is it generates new data and new things all the time. And we have to go in and check to figure out, is there an application here or not? And we have to be careful about moving things forward too. Easiest example, I don't know when Copilot came out, when ChatGPT first started coming out in 2023 and really started to take off, somebody asked ChatGPT for a photo of salmon, like the fish, swimming upstream. And they actually, the photo that the AI put out was a fillet of salmon swimming upstream. So we have to put some checks and balances on AI because it doesn't know what it doesn't know just yet. And I think we have to be careful in understanding how far ahead we think AI really is right now. There's a lot of organizations saying AI, AI, AI. Right now, let's start doing it. Well, we have probably a good 5 years of testing to figure out how exactly do we really want to leverage it. And should we wait until everybody else figures it out, or should we do it now? My argument is don't wait, because you're missing out on all of the transformational cultural pieces of learning and innovation and potential people factors. You're going to miss out on that for those 5 years of that period of trial and error that you're going to have to play catch up around and throw a lot of time, energy, money, resources, things like that.
I would add as well, Paul, I think you covered it so very well. Even beyond a clinical trial program where it begins and ends, there are necessary bookends that have to precede and follow that, and AI is helping us there as well. So before a patient can ever enter a clinical trial program, they have to have a diagnosis, right? Some of the disease states that we work with in our field today literally have 8, 9, 10-year delays in diagnosis. So how can you apply AI to clinical data sets, to claims data, to find patterns and identify these patients at earlier stages before they have a clinical diagnosis, but when those signals are there, that they have something undiagnosed? And there are many ways to do that through artificial intelligence interpretation of imaging data, natural language processing of clinical data, big data analysis of discrete variables that may exist in clinical records or in claims data. A lot of exciting work being done there. Once a medicine is approved and it's turned loose into the real world, you then need to understand what's actually happening with it, not in a population maybe of hundreds, but in a population of many thousands. And we've not had good ways to assess the performance of therapies in a real world setting at a large scale. But AI applied to these large data sets, like claims data, for example, or large clinical record databases, is giving us the ability to do that, right? So maybe we discover a safety event 3 years earlier than we would have if we were relying on traditional methods to generate real world data. So I think
And
it's
disease progression, how do you
Absolutely.
anticipate that?
absolutely.
And you bring it up, thank you for kind of, because you just gave me some more ideas here.
Yeah.
So AI, where it really started to prove its value was during COVID. Everybody got shut in, and then all of a sudden we're left to figure out the supply chain issue. We're left to figure out, where is this virus at? How do we track it? How do these companies, specifically one of them was called Cognovi, they started to create data sets using other types of factors, like emotional AI, whereas they could look at social media comments and, for example, to try and overlay that with claims data and figure out, is the virus here or more over in this area? And then they could try and track and figure out, predict where the virus was actually moving, right? And so these bigger scale, I guess I hate to call them surveillance products because of the privacy issues along with it, but essentially that's what it is. It's tracking the prevalence as it's moving from one place to the next. Now imagine translate that into chronic disease and rare disease. And in rare disease, I mean, identifying a rare disease is very, very difficult, right? So there's a lot of promise for utilizing AI to help us identify rare disease patients as well.
Thank you. We've talked a lot about the benefits and innovation that comes with AI. What kind of ethical considerations should we be aware of when implementing AI into pharmaceutical practices?
Man, that's the conversation. I think first things first, we have to think about privacy and security, especially in our field, right? It's health, the reams of healthcare data out there, and I use ream as a sort of satirical way of describing it. I mean, it's just, you can't really conceive it, right? The number of data that is generated per day in healthcare is very, very, very much. And a lot of that data, people trust, they're trusting people to keep your data anonymized, right? So we have to think about that. How do we keep our patients' data, our physicians and customers' data private, our employees' data private, or at least have some sort of digital hygiene to it, where if something happens, we're gonna work to help correct it, right? I mean, cybersecurity issues, as we've seen recently, just in Change Healthcare, for example, really impacted many things. So that's number one. It's how do we get people to, number one, be comfortable knowing that we might have their data, but we're leveraging it in a way that's going to benefit them. So that's, I think, the big one. Then there's the whole people angle when you think about it. The displacement of jobs. I'm not too worried about it, quite frankly, because in the years that I've been a futurist, everybody's been talking about AI replacing jobs for like 30 years. And really the only job that has ever gone away completely is the elevator operator. And in some places you can kind of, somebody might be doing that, but that's really the only one that has ever really truly gone away. It's my view that it's not AI that's going to replace you or anybody, really. It's going to be those people who use AI are going to replace those who don't. Imagine AI, it's not just, you mentioned that we like PowerPoint, right? Imagine you're not signing into PowerPoint every day, you're signing into Copilot every day. It's just another tool to do your job, right? That's an easy instance, because back when PowerPoint first came out, nobody wanted to use PowerPoint either, until it became a staple. And then it went through a period of all the dominoes being set up and somebody finally knocked it over. And now, well, I think we certainly wish maybe PowerPoint would go away and we used other things, but that's another battle for another day. I really do think too, we have to tread carefully with AI. I think there are a lot of businesses and industries that see the cost savings. About 50% of all pharma companies, for example, when polled in 2023, are already saying, hey, I want to use this for cost savings. So what does that mean? Are you talking people, head count? If you're not talking, or are you talking about efficiency of process? I want to believe they mean efficiency of process. But there are, in every industry, there are some people who misuse it, right? So how do we navigate that? There's also the social angle here too. Just look what happened with the Writers Guild and the Screen Actors Guilds over the last year or so. When you think about using people's likeness and their data, it gets back to that privacy element. How do you pay for them? In advertising, for example, when you put an actor into an ad, but you're using their likeness that was generated by AI, how do you pay them the residuals that are due for them? Or do you wait to get sued? I mean, these are some of the ethical things that we are looking at just from a marketing perspective, but there's probably a litany of ethical things when you think about clinical trials and the privacy of data. The other one I would think about is the dangers of AI being fraudulent. So you may have seen some studies recently in some medical literature about how generative AI, the responses crafted by these generative AI algorithms in sort of a chatbot fashion, 80% of people felt that those responses from the algorithm were more human than the responses from doctors. Now, if that's the case, then what you really need to be careful of is, will we be seeing these AI assistants, these emotional AI assistants come into being, especially in patient care, when you think about some of the big gaps that we had to solve for in healthcare? Will people be leaning into these emotional AIs? And if so, are people going to be fraudulent? Can they then take advantage of you because they're getting that sense of empathy that they're not getting elsewhere? They're getting it from one of these avatars. So you have to think about that. And then also too, another one, I would say, just generally governance. Like, how do you govern an algorithm? How do you explain the algorithm after that? Right? If we're going to be leveraging AI in healthcare across the board, or AI just in our lives in general, how do you, Akash, believe that the algorithm is correct? How do you explain it to somebody who says that they want to believe that, oh, your prescription was dictated by an AI? Well, are you going to trust the computer, or are you going to trust the person? That's why I say, and I believe that AI isn't really ever going to take people's jobs. You're going to have to work in a human AI machine. It's human plus machine model in order to get the best outcomes for people.
Thank you. We have about 25 minutes left. I'm going to open it up to any questions.
I'll go first. Sticking to the subject of clinical trials, I'm just eager to also hear from the D&I perspective. What contributions has been made, or what contributions can be made to improve clinical trial transparency and also patient trust? So thanks for that question. That's a good question. That is one of our, core major focuses here at UCB on how can we better diversify clinical trials, right? Understanding the different underrepresented groups that we can serve. And that is one of our strategic plans going into 2025. One of the things that we have to, again, begin to wrap our minds around is, particularly, I'll use the African American community, is really understanding why there's a distrust within the African American community and healthcare, right? On the flip side, within the Hispanic Latinx community, there is a strong trust. They really believe their doctors. They really believe what they tell them, right? But how do you begin to then build that alliance, that partnership to diversify that clinical trial, right? To get people to come more to that clinical trial. That's the thing that we have to solve for, right? Because you can partner with, say, we're trying to diversify clinical trials when it comes to epilepsy, as you said, example. You can partner with the Epilepsy Foundation and to go in these communities and say, hey, we got a clinical trial, sign up. But it's got to be more than that, right? Because in our community, we still have trauma from a study that was done years ago, the Tuskegee experiment, right? We still have trauma from that. That's well before I was born, right? So it's really begin to understand, how do we go into the communities, build that trust, build that partnership, how do we best message, right? Particularly on how that drug is being administered, right? It's a pill, it's a liquid, an injection, right? All those things have to come into play, and you are trying to gain that trust to diversify your clinical trial. It's important that we have the diversity, right? Because we still need to know how these drugs operate outside of our core base of who we typically use to be or who participates in those clinical trials. So for us, it's It's understanding the community, going in the community to make that trust, partnering with the right organizations to build that trust so they can understand the benefits of being a part of that clinical trial that ultimately will help them or ultimately save their lives. Hopefully that makes sense. Thank you.
I'll add the AI piece side of that too. If AI becomes a part of the clinical trial, there's another trust angle too that we're gonna have to overcome.
And I was gonna mention that because even though AI can serve as a valuable tool, can't remove the humanistic piece of it, right? You know, you can't just go into a community and say, well, based on AI, this is the right person for this clinical trial that has this diverse background. There still has to be that level of trust that has to be built because you're just not gonna come into a church and say, hey, can I raise my hand and try to promote my clinical trial? They're gonna say, like, what are you talking about? You're asking me to be, doesn't matter how much you pay them, so it's that trust factor, right? And that educational factor that has to come behind that to ensure that, you know, you have people that want to participate. That diversity in clinical trial is very, very key. We have to improve and build upon it. Some pharma companies do it better than others, but that is a core focus for us, not only in the US, but also globally. I know you have it.
Yes, okay. So I was wondering, when you all were speaking about networking and things like that, my question is, how do you maintain those relationships and being genuine? For example, let's say we're meeting today and now and essentially we're all each other's network. But how do I maintain that connection with you to where I am having meetings with you, like you mentioned, about different things happening in I guess, culturally, but also that can affect us professionally. You know what I mean? Like, how are we leveraging one connection today into being really in my network? I don't feel like just because I meet you today and we're on LinkedIn, you're really in my network. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if that makes sense. But that,
You make a really good point. I think this is one of the dangers of social media, is that it creates a false impression of a relationship and intimacy where one doesn't actually exist, right? So I think we have to be wary of that. I think it's an entry point, and it does not become a substitute for a real relationship. And so, you know, I think it comes down to follow-up, right? You can make a connection with somebody at a live meeting, you can make a connection with somebody on social media, but then you have to invest in that relationship through the traditional ways that we have always built relationships as human beings. And that means that you have connection, you have dialogue, you share experiences with each other, you seek and provide feedback to people. All of that, I think, is necessary today, just like it was 100 years ago.
I could tell you that, I totally agree, but someone on LinkedIn that was interested in going into the DE&I profession at their job reached out to me, right? And I get on LinkedIn, I can't tell you how many times I've reached out to me. This individual actually reached out to me and said, can I schedule bi-weekly one-on-ones with you just to converse and pick your brain? If we don't have anything to talk about, we can always cancel it. And I said, sure, because they were very intentional about it, right? And we meet on Mondays, every other Monday, just to talk about their journey, professional development, how can they implement DE&I. And we've established a rapport through that connection as opposed to someone sending me a general email and say, hey, when your time permits, let's schedule a meeting. What does your schedule look like? And then I say, my schedule is open, and then I never hear from them for another 3 months, right? So that person was very intentional. So I think that if you're gonna make that connection through a social media platform, be intentional about that connection, but be aware of that individual's time, you know, their temperature, kind of measure that and see how they respond. If they give the right response, then try to make that connection a little bit more genuine so you can really build that network.
I'm just gonna add, for me, what works is I've got to be getting value out of it too. And I gotta feel like I'm providing value, right? So, you know, I was trying to, when you were listening, I was thinking about all the people I've started connections with and they've just drifted off. And my belief is one of us didn't create value for the other person. You know, maybe me not for them, or them not for me. So it kind of then it's a catch-up industry. And there's some people that for a lot of years, and they're not, I wouldn't say that, they become friends, but they're not because they're friends. I get a lot of value out of it. And so I then dig into into the conversation. LinkedIn is kind of a funky thing because I get, I don't know, tons of people saying, I applied for a job, or do you have 10 minutes to talk? And I'm thinking, conceptually, I probably could find 10 minutes, but I don't know if that's what I want to do. And then I get a lot of people saying, hey, I see you've got an opening, I'm a recruiter. So, but before that, it was when I was on the immuno side on the commercial business, so I don't see much, I see value on LinkedIn, but I use it more for newsfeed than I do for connection piece. Or I come by someone's cell phone if I use that and send them a message.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
So if you're early on in your career and your mentor is very senior level executive, so your early career, how do you assess the value that you can add to that relationship? Because obviously you're getting a mentorship from the senior executive, but to make sure that it's a symbiotic relationship, how do you kind of inquire or assess that from the early career perspective?
So I'll take the first pass. And then, I have a lot of people in different parts of that career who I talk to. What I'm looking for from them is the truth of what's happening, whether it's within the organization or within a company. I really just want to know like the authentic truth of where people are, and I don't like filtered conversations. I'm extremely transparent. I just like, hey, Simon, this is really bad right now. But we're going through an organizational redesign, and some things are going really well, some things are going not so well. I need to know that because everything gets filtered to you, and then you hear everything is the feedback you're saying is everything. You got to really dig for the reality and the truth. And the truth is people are filtering. So that's how I get a lot. That's the value I get out of it. I can call, and there's a couple of people who I just reach out to and say, look, what the hell's going on? And they'll tell me. And I go, okay. And then I might talk to my boss, who's head of HR, and say, before you get on that call, you've got to understand this is the pulse that's occurring right now. I would never have known that without the truth. So.
Oh,
I just have one quick thing to add, and then go back to you, Trent. So, think of it this other way too. I think in every mentorship that I've been involved with a senior executive, there's a mutual benefit, right? And if the senior executive doesn't want to learn anything from you, it's not a beneficial relationship for you, right? So it's not about them necessarily just always like helping you figure out how you want to evolve your career, where can you go, how do you network. If they're not learning from you either, then it's very one-sided mentorship. Perhaps you should find another mentor. And I'm not assuming you have a mentor who's like that or not like that right now, but that's at least kind of the approach, because you want to be learning just as much as they're learning as well, just to make sure that you're both on a journey together. Because I think the more that I've been, working for this organization, for other organizations in the past, it's scenarios happen that we've never seen before. And many times the executives that you're working with, they've never gone through them too, just like you. And so you develop a symbiotic relationship where we're all in this together. How do we actually learn and move forward in such a way that is beneficial for both of us, for everyone, and so on?
How do you ask the question? Like sometimes I'm like, oh, is there anything I can help you with? Well, obviously, sometimes they're not in your field. So it's not like, oh, if you have any project that can support you, let me know. But, how are you getting anything from this?
A really specific tactic I've learned over the years is because I used to have to reach out to experts in their field to get them or poke their interest to determine whether or not they'd want to talk with my client or, and learn about a particular field. And so I would learn everything that I could about them any medical literature that they've been in, other innovation opportunities, maybe they've been interviewed in a certain magazine or something like that, just to kind of get a taste for what their interests are. And then if it was a cold reach out, I would reach out to them with something that I think they would be interested in, whether it's a link to something else, a chart of information that says, hey, this trend is going in this direction, or something that I know might be able to pique their interest. And then that at least starts the conversation. So that's a very specific tactic. It's kind of like if you're interviewing at a potential company, for example, sending out a thank you note is I think really, really important, especially if you can tie it back to something that you learned from them during the conversation. So when I interview somebody and I get a thank you note that's very canned, to me, it's a signal of, okay, maybe they weren't paying attention to the conversation. But when somebody sends me something, say, hey, Paul, remember when you mentioned this about X, Y, Z? Did you see this yesterday? Just thinking of you, thank you so much. I'd love to continue talking about this moving forward. And that actually keeps the connection going. Trying to cut you off.
So I'm a yes and. So theoretically, right, when you are assigned a mentor, someone that's of a senior level, the goal is that the person at the senior level can guide you, provide you with advice, experience, learnings, things of that nature. Typically, it doesn't really work out that way, right? Typically, you're assigned a mentor will put 30 minutes on the calendar. Hey, what do you want to talk about today? And then that's pretty much it, right? But I think that on top of what Paul has shared and what Simon has shared, it's up to you to determine what that relationship is going to look like.
Yeah,
so when you establish, so when you're given a senior level individual, you have to be cognizant of the time that they do have. So how do I take advantage of this 30 minutes, this hour, or whatever the case, 45 minutes, we're changing our meeting on how we're, so come with an agenda or topics of discussion that you want to address or experiences, so that you can get the most out of that. And what you'll find is as you come with more information to seek, then that senior leader that is your mentor will begin to open up more, provide more advice, guidance, or mentorship for you. If you go in with thank you so much for being my mentor. My name is Trenton Meredith, and I'm trying to grow at UCB or whatever company, then you might not get the response you want because it's so open-ended and there's no intentionality behind that. So I would say be intentional when you get that mentor. To Paul's point, learn about your mentor, right? Ask questions for your mentor. Then be able to provide to your mentor what you want to accomplish, where you want to be within your first year of the organization, 3 years, 5 years, so forth and so on.
Your question also made me reflect on kind of my own experiences as a mentor and like why I enjoy or don't enjoy certain experiences. And I think it's not purely transactional, or maybe the value that I derive from that as a mentor is not always so purely tangible. So for me, sometimes I just really value the opportunity to make a relationship with somebody, right? We all have relationships that we enjoy, and it's not necessarily because I'm giving you something and you're giving me something, but because we enjoy that person and we enjoy the experience of having a relationship with them. Sometimes it's a sense that I'm doing something worthwhile. I'm giving something back out of the experience that I've gained in my career. And that's a value to me, that sense that I'm doing something that's actually worthwhile to another person. And then I think don't underestimate the degree to which exercising those mentorship skills helps that mentor to refine those skills even more, right? So even in the practice of being a mentor, they themselves are growing and developing in new ways. And those are less tangible forms of value, but for me, in my experience, those are worthwhile.
And to add to that too, as well, your mentor does not need to be the only mentor, right? You might have different types of mentors for different functions of what you're doing. So for example, a key mentor of mine is still my consulting partner from 10 years ago. Because number one, he is a good buddy of mine, but also he genuinely wants to learn, like what are the issues that you're facing as an organization in the medical world and so on and so forth, how does that mean that he needs to evolve his business as the world of consulting changes? So there's still some transactional elements too, but you know, I've got a consulting mentor, I've got a strategy mentor here within UCB. And then there's just, I like to call them sparring partners externally, people who are doing really interesting things that think I might be doing something interesting, and how do we learn together, right? So you never know where a mentor is gonna come from. But I would also recommend, like, don't have just one, right? Especially because of just thinking back to what Trenton mentioned, is the more senior you tend to be, the less time you tend to have, and also they might have other mentees and everything like that. So you got to think about how to be respectful of time, and so on.
Thank you very much.
I have a question for Simon and Trenton. Simon, you mentioned the importance of looking for companies that explicitly say that they have a D&I initiative or that they do support D&I. But I feel like while I was looking for fellowship programs, I noticed that a lot of companies do say that, but they don't necessarily have any action behind it. And that's not always something that you can see just by like looking at the company website or looking at the brochure. Sometimes you don't realize that until you actually have them. So do you guys have any ideas of what are some things we can look out for when looking at these companies in particular, or questions that we should ask to really understand whether there is action being put towards that mission?
Let's start. What do you guys think? Austin, you want to start? So I'm going to tell you what I would do, and then I'll tell you why it's a little flawed as well. So I'd look for, you know, company in anything they publicize, whether it's any of their annual reports, they'll state what their D&I goals are or their equity goals are, their websites. What I would look for, and therefore these are our results, because once they have the measurable results, they're holding themselves accountable. BMS does a really good job of doing this. This is what our plan was, this is where we are. This was our plan next year, and this is how we're trending. So that to me is one core indicator. The other one is to like do your LinkedIn searches and your searches on, you know, do they have a D&I team? Do they have ERGs? Do they have structure? And you can find it. I mean, it's so quick and easy to find that information now. The UCB, which is interesting, is we're probably not as good at publicizing our results as externally as we are at managing our results internally. So that would be a gap. That's why I said, you know, we would not be a great example of that. But if you look at our ERGs and some of the investments that we've made, investments in sustainability and things, it would give you that kind of indication. It's really the search. And then, you know, the hard part is I interviewed someone a couple of weeks ago, and we started in a D&I conversation. And that's all we talked about. And because I was getting a lot of questions, I was asked, but then at the end of the interview, I'm like, holy cow, I have no idea the competency of this person for the role. And then I was like, do I go back? And so I think it's do your research ahead of time, but definitely ask the question. You know, just be thoughtful of how you ask it. Not that you don't ask it, just be thoughtful of how you ask it.
And I would agree. I would also look at, particularly if you go to career fairs and conferences, look at how they are represented, right? Across the dynamic, gender representation, race, ethnicity. Look at how the company is represented. And to your point, you know, you can do your research, but we're strategic about what we want to share externally, right? The reason why we're strategic about it is because there have been repercussions when companies put these goals out there. Many people believe it's reverse discrimination. So we're very strategic about what we want to accomplish, how we want to share. Just because a company has DE&I goals published does not necessarily mean that they're living. So to Simon's point, you know, when you get into the interview, into it, see what's going on, see what's being represented. Are the employee resource groups really doing what they're supposed to be doing? Are they really not only helping employees? Are they really driving the business? Are there, you know, does leadership verbally support, you know, the cultural evolution that's necessary? You know, we want to make sure that, you know, we have the right representation from the employee base and from the patient base. We want that to mirror one another, right? And so when you come to UCB and you talk to our leaders, you know, when you talk to USLT, you talk to XCOM, they support it. We just had I think 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, we just had a meeting where the board of directors came to Atlanta, get an opportunity to sit down and have a lunch, a very non-scripted, authentic lunch. And lunch, if you talk to every board of director that was there, cultural evolution, diversity, equity, inclusion, fair treatment was a core topic of discussion and core questions. If your board of directors is speaking that language, that tells you that there's a strong support. So again, to Simon's point, it's doing your research, it's asking the right questions. I would not say that you would allow that to dominate an interview, right? Yeah, it's great to understand that, but you have to make sure that you, not only are you seeking a career that's going to be suitable for your growth and your financial gain, but does it really fit within your morals and ethics as well, right? Do you see people that look like you, or there is intentionality to get people that look like you to not only be in the organization, but to develop in the organization, grow in the organization, and succeed in the organization.
So when we sat down, what was the first thing I said? I'm like, create an all male panel. I'm like, it annoyed me, you know. So then, you know, if you look at our U.S. leadership team, where 8 out of, there's 10 members on it, 8 are female, we have 4 people who identify as a person of color and so on, or 3, right, person of color. And so, and then you look at our XCOM, you see half of our executive committee are females, half male. So I think you have to look at that and go to an all white male executive committee, and then you look at the next, and that's what you see. That's probably a good indicator that they've got some progression that they need to make, or they've made a decision on the progression that they've decided not to make. And that's what you do.
And I always, and I'm gonna,
we love this. We talk about.
But let me always put this caveat in there, particularly with our new ways of hiring. Yes, we want to be diverse. Yes, we want to be inclusive. Yes, we want to provide equal opportunity. But at the end of the day, it's about having the right person in the position, the person that has the potential to do well at the job, agnostic of what they look like, how they identify, what their gender is. That's really the end goal. But what we're trying to do and we're doing is to ensure that we have fair representation across the entire organization, right? That's what we're trying to do. We're putting forth those efforts to ensure that takes place. But we want to make sure that we have the right people in the right position to get the job done. Because at the end of the day, we've got to help our patients. What we're doing, we're saving lives. So our drugs don't discriminate. Our drugs don't say, well, because you're Black, we're not going to work for you, but because you're white, we're going to work for you, or because you're Indian, we're going to work for you, or because you're gay, we're not going to work for you. Our drugs are agnostic, right? And so we want to make sure that we have the right people in place to drive this company where it needs to be. That makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. We are at time for today. I want to thank you very much. We got some great responses, and it was really helpful.
Can I make one closing remark?
Yeah, please.
When I was setting up this session and reaching out to panelists, the goal was to talk about things that would help us fellows during our fellowship program to better craft our experiences, and to also prepare us for full-time roles in terms of all the new things that are happening in the industry. So there's AI, D&I is always a big topic of conversation, and a ton of other things that are just always happening, like Jeff said, too. We're at the cutting edge of innovation, right? And I just wanted to say thank you to you all for being available. Sorry, something in my throat. Hopefully I'm good. I just want to thank you all for being available, taking time out of your busy schedules to be here and really tackle that goal of the topic we wanted to discuss today. I really don't think it could have went any better. And I know that I got a lot out of it, and I feel like there are new things that I can focus on now and hone in on in the remainder of my fellowship program, and I hope that everyone else feels the same way. As an example, my fellowship director here, she always mentions to me and reminds me that our fellowship experience is our own, and we do have the autonomy to make some experiences for ourselves, or like ask for things whenever we're interested in. So I think it's really good that we now have this information to bring into our experiences. So just want to say thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.